Children, how are you? Fine. So, how was your lesson yesterday? Any question you do have? See, in this chapter, the Cold War era, what have we discussed so far? Okay, we discussed about Cuban Missile Crisis. Fine. We discussed the very key concept at length. What is the Cold War? We discussed about emergence of two power blocks, Eastern Alliance, Western Alliance. Okay, the way world had been divided into these two alliances. Fine. And the two superpowers led by two superpowers. One side we had the United States, another side we had the Soviet Union. Fine. And then yesterday in our last class we discussed about arenas of the Cold War. Different areas, the way it kept on rolling from one area to another, and what had been their concerns. How had they succeeded in coming out? What has been their plan? And at last, in yesterday's topic, we had also discussed about the balance of weapons and arms control. As a result, in the decade of 1960s, three landmark agreements had been signed, and these agreements were, yes, I hope you all are able to recall it: Limited Test Ban Treaty, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Fine. After several rounds of arms limitation talks, these treaties had come into existence. Okay. Today we are going to discuss challenge to bipolarity. Two poles we are having in the bipolar world. Two superpowers we had those days. And now, what had been the challenge? Who really took the initiative? That we are going to discuss today. A very interesting topic. Obviously, the Cold War divided the world into two rival alliances, no doubt. Fine. And certainly in this context, non-alignment came or emerged, and non-alignment offered the newly decolonized countries, the newly free nation, the nations that had just got freedom, nations of countries of the continents like Africa, continents like Asia, and the continents like Latin America. Fine. So, this non-aligned movement, in fact, it offered a real choice, or you can say a third option. They are having that first option, they can go with United States of America, Western Alliance. They can go with the Eastern Alliance, USSR, Soviet Union, led by the Soviet Union. Two options they were having. Now they got the third option. Means they cannot join either of the alliances. Earlier they were not having this option, in fact, this freedom, this choice. Now they got this choice as well. So certainly here we are going to discuss about non-aligned movement. Fine. Without knowing their roots, without knowing their, without tracking them, how did it come into existence? Who had been the people? What were the circumstances that forced such a movement to come out on the international platform? Those all things we are going to discuss under this non-aligned movement. When we are talking about the roots, certainly those days we are having the friendship between the three leaders of three different countries, and it was the Yugoslavia nation, Yugoslavia's head of the state, the president of Yugoslavia, Josip Broz Tito. Josip Broz Tito, because he had been the president of the nation, and he was a real thinker, real champion of non-aligned movement. And when we go about to track or trace his history, then certainly he fought a very decisive role against Germany in the World War II, in Second World War. Okay, Joseph Broz Tito. So Yugoslavia, Joseph Broz Tito, and simultaneously he also maintained the distance from the Soviet Union against Germany, but also maintained distance from Soviet Union, and finally he succeeded in finding the unity, in getting Yugoslavia united. Fine. So first was Yugoslavia's president Josip Broz Tito. And how can we forget about our first prime minister Pandit Nehru? Okay. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who has been a thinker, who has been a statesman, who does have the credit, who made several efforts for the Asian unity, for decolonization, for even the nuclear disarmament, and who always kept pleading about peaceful coexistence. For the world peace, he has been the champion thinker of world peace and peaceful coexistence. Fine. And one leader from Egypt's leader Gamal Abdel Nasser. Okay, we know that Egypt is a nation in which continent? African continent. Yes, Egypt is a nation in African continent. So apart from these two personality, the third one and the friendship of these three were very famous, and somewhere their friendship proved a decisive, and their friendship ultimately brought a positive result in the form of non-aligned movement. Okay, so from the means during the decade of 1950s, 60s, and means entire 60s and 50s he almost ruled, and he in fact was the champion thinker of socialism, Arab nationalism, and he was dead against imperialism. So even the nationalization of the Suez Canal, we know about the Suez Canal, you must have read earlier that, and even for this some conflict also occurred in the past. So these three leaders, basically children, these three leaders played a very important role, and apart from these three, two more were there. They were well backed by the two more leader, and in this context no one can forget one name from Indonesia. Yes children, that name from Indonesia is of Sukarno. Okay, first president of Indonesia, and because he does have the credit of leading the freedom struggle as well, he was the champion thinker of socialism, dead against imperialism, and he organized the conference. About that conference we will discuss later on, Bandung Conference. Yes, Bandung Conference for Afro-Asian unity. Okay, so it was in Indonesia's Sukarno, first president, and even the fifth one. Certainly in this context it will be better for us to discuss about the fifth personality also. That person is Ghana, one nation earlier known as Gold Coast. Ghana's first prime minister Kwame Nkrumah. Fine. He does have the credit of leading the freedom movement, and he also advocated for socialism, He was also in favor of African unity and the neo-colonialism, the neo-colonial power he opposed. And what happened with him later on, that is a different story. But these five leaders, in fact, they are known as the founders of Nam. Five founders of Nam. So whenever it will be asked, five founders of Nam, so you need to tell the name of these five statesmen, these five leader of the world that gave a third option. Okay, with their support, in fact, children, the non-aligned movement came into existence, and its first summit has been held in Belgrade in the year 1961. 25 member states attended this meeting. Okay, 25 member states are attending this meeting, and the existence of, the coming of, the emergence of non-aligned movement, it was basically the result of, the culmination of three important factors. The first, see, if any such organization at the international level on world stature comes into existence, they do have some planning and they are sticking to the basics. What were those, or you can say here, the guiding philosophy for them, guiding force for them? Very first, that they wanted to ensure the cooperation among these five countries. Okay, they were always in favor that these five nations must come together. So at least such philosophy, such thinking brought a positive result at last. So the first one, cooperation among these five countries, what we discussed just now. Then second, the growing Cold War tensions and its widening arenas, because Cold War tensions were increasing, their arenas were being widened. So unless they thought that unless we provide a real option, unless we provide a third option also to the countries of the world, to the newly independent, newly emerged nation of the world, okay, justice we can't think or we can't do in absence of giving them a third option, children. That's why this was the second factor. And the third, many newly decolonized African countries, they also entered into the international arena. We say dramatic entry. And by 1960, 16 new African members were there in the United Nations. In the UN, there were 16 new African nations. Fine. So this non-aligned movement was the culmination of the three important factors. First summit, as we are discussing, 25 member states attended it, and it was the beginning. Thereafter, over the years, the membership started expanding. More and more countries became its member. The 17th summit was held in Venezuela. Okay, and the year was 2016, 4 years ago. And from 25 in the first to 120 members, 120 member states, 120 member states, they attended in 17th summit, this 17th summit of NAM in 2016 in Venezuela. And apart from these 120 member states, 17 observer countries were also there. They were not the member, they used to be the observer nations, the observer countries. And then we had the 18th summit at Baku, Azerbaijan. It was in 2019, last year, children, October 2019. And 19th is proposed in 2022. Fine. So this was a very brief sketch of the non-aligned movement. Now their basic concept, in fact. What is this non-aligned movement, and what was it those days? What has been their concept? How did it become a very popular international movement? That we are going to discuss under this non-aligned movement. This non-aligned movement, in fact, as the name itself suggests, it's non-aligned. Means not poised towards any superpower of the or existing superpower of the world or any dominant super countries of the world. So it grew into, it became a popular international movement, and various countries of various different political systems, various interests, they joined it. So it was first thing that very popular international system and countries of various political system and interests, they joined it. As a result, this movement, non-aligned movement, became less homogeneous. Means if you want to look for the homogeneous aspect, that everything must be similar, the similar, or the member states must have the similar ideology. No, they may have their different political systems, they may have their own political interests, but they are the member. Okay, that's why it also made this non-aligned movement more difficult to define it in very precise terms, in very clear cut terms, in very neat terms, what we say. And when we ask that what does it stand for, what did it really stand for, the problem was that in case of non-aligned movement now, it was very easier to define in terms of what it was not. Generally, definition is what is it. About anything, any concept, we tell about that concept. But here, defining naam was very difficult, and it was easier that what it is not, what it was not. It was not about being a member of an alliance, we can say it. But what is it or what was it those days? That we are going to discuss, that we need to understand. Fine. So, non-aligned movement, generally we say that the policy of generally the policy we do have staying away from alliances. The policy of staying away from alliances, generally we consider that it's a isolationism or neutrality. But the policy of staying away from alliances should not be considered isolationism or neutrality. Fine. And this non-alignment is not isolationism, since isolationism means remaining aloof from world affairs. If you are separating yourself, if you are keeping yourself aloof from the world affair, this is the real meaning of isolation. And that's why, how can we sum it up, isolationism or isolation? That, or for example, if we give in case of the American foreign policy, US foreign policy, since its war of independence, what was the year? Yes, war of independence. And just after that, during those era, in fact, since then up to the beginning of the First World War, America followed this policy of isolationism. America kept itself aloof. And even during the World War, we know that in the mid of the First World War, America entered, America participated when it was almost evident that now the side I am going to join, the Allied forces, they are going to win. Okay, so America, as we know, is a developed country, at present is the only superpower and is most clever. Okay, it weighs its profit and loss first and then decide what next step it is going to take, and it must take that step. Fine. So, and this non-aligned countries, including India. So, non-alignment is not isolationism. The isolationism that has been practiced by America till the beginning of the First World War, since the days of War of Independence, or just after getting independence, you can say it. Okay, and now, on the other hand, the non-aligned countries, even if we say about our country, India, non-aligned countries used to play a very important role, as India played a crucial role in mediating between the two rival alliances. Okay, and that rival alliances For what? For stability, for peace. Okay, India never hesitated in mediating, and their strength was based on their unity and their resolve. First, that they were united, and second, their commitment, their resolve to remain non aligned. If you say that were there not attempts made by these two superpowers to bring them into their alliances, to force them that please come and join my group? Yes, efforts were there. They were under immense pressure, but their resolve, their commitment to the unity, to the and their commitment towards the policy of non-alignment, they it was very tough for these superpowers to convince them. Okay, so the commitment here that kept the non-aligned movement going ahead. So non-alignment is not isolationism, and second thing now, that non-alignment is not even neutrality. It is not even neutrality. Now you can ask that, sir, then what does neutrality means? Neutrality simply means a policy of staying out of war. In principle, a policy of staying out of war. You are neutral. Just like fight is going on, I have nothing to do with it. Okay, I just saw it, overlooked it, and moved ahead. Fine. So you are neutral. States who are practicing the neutrality, they are not required to help end a war. Who are neutral, they won't feel like helping in ending a war, and they do not get involved in wars. They do not take any position on the appropriateness or morality. Who is right, who is wrong, the war should take place, war shouldn't take place. They have nothing to do with it. So non-aligned states, including these 5 founding members, including our country, were actually involved in wars, not for their own purpose only. They were involved and they participated and they worked to prevent war between others. And the war that had already broken out, the war that had already erupted, the war that had already started, they didn't want it to continue. And with their best effort, they put their best effort in ending those wars. So this is the non-alignment. Non-alignment means the policy, the commitment, what do you have? You need to stick to it. So it is not neutrality, it is not isolationism, it is about actively participating in the world affairs without joining either of the alliances. Fine, children? Any question you do have, must ask. And the worksheets or the assignments that will be given to you, do it religiously. And while going through the text, must underline text. If texts or textbooks are not available with you, download the PDF file, okay, and jot down the main points, the keyword. These keywords are main point that will help you a lot. Okay, good day, take care, stay safe.